MTG scoundrels, it's in the cardboard. Ladies and gentlemen, scoundrels of all ages, welcome back to another episode of Modern Weekly. Today on the docket, we have Mono Blue Tron versus Hardened Scales. Mono Blue Tron being a variant that hasn't seen as much play as of late, but still a fun deck in Modern. And of course, Hardened Scales still being one of the best decks in the format. Looks like we have an Inkmoth Nexus here and pass. There is an Urza's Land and passing as well. Urza's Saga into a Patchwork Automaton. Into a Welding Jar. Trigger, putting a counter on the Patchwork Automaton. And here we have a Lorien's revealed. Cycling it to find a basic island. And untap and draw. And there is a Hall of the Storm Giants and passing the turn. There is the Arcbound Ravager, putting a counter on the Patchwork Automaton. Activating the Grove of the Burn Whallows there to cast Ancient Stirrings, putting us to 21 to 20. And picking up the Hangerback Walker from that Ancient Stirrings. And then an attack for 3. And a pass of the turn. Putting us at 18 to 20. There is an Urza's Power Plant. Just need the tower for Tron to be active. Looks like Urza's Saga hitting its 3rd chapter here. Depending on... Looks like Paul's debating a response here. Letting it resolve. The Scales player. Floating a mana. Finding the Ozolith. Playing Boseiju as land for turn. And casting the Agatha Soul Cauldron. Looks like debating on what to do next here. I assume just doing math. A lot of options with Ravager on the board. Agatha Soul Cauldron available and the Ozolith here. Looks like sacking the automaton to the Arcbound Ravager, putting the counters on the Ozolith. Before combat, activating the Inkmoth Nexus. Sacking the Welding Jar to the Ravager. Sacking the Ravager to the Ozolith. Well, to itself, essentially, moving its counters to the Ozolith. The mono blue Tron player here reading the Ozolith. Inkmoth Nexus, of course, deals its damage in poison damage. And there is the Tishana's Tidebinder. Countering the ability of the Ozolith, it looks like. Soul Cauldron eating an Arcbound Ravager, putting a counter on the Inkmoth Nexus and attacking for 5 poison. Tidebinder getting in for 3. And there is the One Ring and passing the turn. Keeping this Inkmoth Nexus from killing the Tron player here for a turn at least. There is another Inkmoth and a Hangerback Walker and a Zabaz. Taking 1 off of the One Ring here. We'll see if there's any answers. Drawing 2 off the One Ring. This certainly is a difficult spot. 2 Inkmoth Nexuses. A modular creature on the battlefield. Multiple counters that can be moved over to the Ozolith. Alright, there's an Impulse. And scoops them up. Game 1. Going to the Hardened Scales player. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe to the channel. Sideboarding should be interesting here. I don't know how much the mono blue player will bring in, considering they're generally a karnthegreatcreator deck. Maybe a little bit of interaction, not too much. Scales doesn't really have to bring in a ton here either. And of course, check the description below. You'll find a couple of things. 1, timestamps for the individual games, so you can move forward at your leisure, as well as deck lists in case you're looking to build one of these decks. It's never too early to start prepping for Modern Horizons 3 as well as the Fall Modern RCQ season. Moving on to Game 2 here. Looks like the Hardened Scales player has gone to 6. Yep, putting one under and starting with a Tron land into an expedition map. And there is a Grove of the Burn Willows into a Hardened Scales, taking us to 21 to 20. Island for the Tron player and passing. And there is a Zabaz, the Glimmer Wasp. And looks like that will be remanded. Remand, a former staple of the modern format. There's an Urza's Tower. And another map. Replaying Zabaz here. And playing out a Haywire Might. One of the best cards to come out of Brothers War. Looks like we're cracking the expedition map, finding the power plant, the missing piece here. Playing the power plant, Tron is online. And of course by that we mean power plant, Urza Mine, Urza's Tower being on the battlefield, thus Tower making 3 colorless mana and the Mine and Power Plant making 2 colorless mana each, thanks to the others being on the field. And the Tron player looking at their sideboard, that usually means one thing. Yep, 4 mana. Oh no, decided to go with the One Ring. Gave us a little bit of a fake out there. In some ways, that's a pretty solid fake out. But still had the mana to also play Karn the Greatcreator, which is a card that really does some work against this Hardened Scales list. Looks like plussing the Karn here, making the One Ring a creature. Keeping the Karn on the battlefield against Hardened Scales really slows them down, so the plus here not surprising at all. There's a Walking Ballista for casting it for 1, getting 2 counters thanks to the Hardened Scales on the battlefield. And that was the same with the Zabaz earlier. course, blocking with the One Ring. It's looking to get the modular triggers here onto the walking ballista. Tron player activating the One Ring. Activating it again, drawing 2 cards. Probably minusing the karn here, considering they're looking in their sideboard. Plenty of mana to work with. Could also just go get the One Ring. Nope, decided to crack the map. Finding another tower here. Looks like we have 9 mana available. If place the tower for turn. Yep, place the tower for turn. Minus his karn, finds a copy of the One Ring, casts the One Ring. And passing. I guess went and got something else into their hand and played the One Ring out. There's an Arcbound Ravager, getting 2 counters. Activating the One Ring, drawing a card. Untapping, taking 1. Rethinking about drawing 2 here. Plays a land. Minus his karn. Sorry about that earlier. Looks like they plused karn earlier to block the walking ballista. But here goes and gets Mindslaver to take the turn of the Hardened Scales player. Plays a map, passes. Well, I mean, that's a hand. 3 hardened scales, a Boseiju, and a walking ballista. Well, taking control. Using Boseiju, targeting the 1 ring. Essentially to waste it, but also to find a land for the Tron player here. Scales. And its interactions being talked about. As long as Karn's on the battlefield, it makes things a little difficult for him. I think there's a discussion here on if the Arcbound Ravager is sacrificed, if the counters can be put anywhere. And that's ultimately what happened. But I don't think the Ravager could actually be sacrificed here thanks to the Karn the Greatcreator still being on the board. Because notice the Karn. Also, Walking Ballista not being yeah, I'll be scoop it up there. It was going to be tough for the Scales player to make a comeback, considering the repeal that was played, knocking the Ballista back to hand with the Karn being out, not being able to be activated, thanks to the Karn. But once again, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We'll be moving on to Game 3 here. Of course, Alex being one of our favorite Hardened Scales players and a major cog in our meta. Paul as well, on Mono Blue Tron here, has qualified for a couple of RCs. Two mainstays of our meta for sure. Alright, Game 3 here. Looks like both players going to 6. And there's a turn 1 Hardened Scales after the pathway is played. There's his tower and pass. Land here into a Walking Ballista. Getting 2 counters thanks to the Hardened Scales. Island pass. There is an Urza Saga. Casting an Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And attacking for 3. Or for 2, excuse me. It looks like repealing it though, activating it once, pinging the Tron player, and it going back to hand. And second main phase, casting the Hardened Scales. 2 of them on the battlefield now. There is the Urza's power plant. And a pass. Playing an Inkmoth Nexus. And there it is, back again, Walking Ballista. It's on the stack here. We'll get 3 counters if it resolves. And looks like we have a subtlety tossing the Tishana's Tidebinder into exile. Walking Ballista being put back on top for the Scales player here. And there's the Karn the Great Creator. And it's going to get ticked down to find an ensnaring bridge and pass the turn. Third chapter here, making a Karnstruct. And with that much mana being tapped, for the blue Tron player here, would not be surprised if we see a Pithing Needle. And there it is. There is the Pithing Needle. The Karnstruct here looks like it is a 3/3 currently. Island for turn. And there is the ensnaring bridge. Untapping and drawing. Looks like there's the Boseiju targeting the ensnaring bridge. Being channeled here. And that'll send the ensnaring bridge to the yard. We'll probably be finding an island here. There it is. And the Karnstruct rumbling in here. Inkmoth Nexus being activated to pump it. And killing the Karn. Looks like also on end step here, putting a counter on the Ink Moth Nexus, thus getting 3 counters on it. Looks like originally was debating on whether it was going to go on the Karnstruct or the Ink Moth Nexus. Both were available. So this was probably actually in the second main phase. Untapping and drawing. Let's see what the Mono Blue Tron player wants to do here. There was an impulse cast there at the end of turn as well for the Mono Blue Tron player. This is a tough spot. Remember, there's still a Walking Ballista in hand for the Scales player, which could be cast, immediately sent to the yard. So Soul Cauldron could eat it, thus putting more counters on the Ink Moth Nexus if need be here. I guess the real question is there another Karn? To try and slow down this assault. Yep, there is the next Karn the Great Creator. Choosing to minus it here. Finding engineered explosives. And casting engineered explosives on 1. Hopefully to blow up the Pithing Needle and the 2 Hardened scales. Decides to blow it up now. There's a land for turn for the Scales player. Cast Ancient Stirrings. Chooses to get the Urza's Saga. Activates the Ink Moth Nexus. Both coming in. 1 to kill Karn. Ink Moth dealing 3 poison damage to the Tron player. Tron player just passing the turn. Urza's Saga in play. And there is a Walking Ballista on 1. Scales player activating the Inkmoth Nexus and attacking. Mono blue Tron player casting a Warping Whale here. In response, activating the Walking Ballista. And scooping it up from there. Quite the end of Game 3. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. We'll be here next week with another Modern video on Modern Weekly. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week.